Right now, on Law&Crime Special Report, Justice and Peace. The killing of another unarmed black man, 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks, sparked all new outrage in Atlanta and across America. Audio of the 911 call that led to his death has been recently released to the public.
I have a car. I think he's intoxicated. He's in the middle of my drive-thru.
Plus, in California, 2 black men were found hanging from trees within 2 weeks of each other. The bodies of Robert Fuller and Malcolm Harsch were discovered within 45 miles of each other. Among outcries from the community and their families, last night, the LA County officials announced they were taking a deeper look.
We're going to continue with the video canvas to see if we can identify any surveillance video or home video.
Later, over the weekend, an Ohio police officer, Anthony Johnson, was caught on camera punching an unarmed man in the face. Johnson, who has been dubbed the dancing cop, went viral in 2015 for dancing with kids in the community.
Hey, what? Cause I'm feeling what?
Justice and Peace bringing you inside the movement for police reform. It's Tuesday, June 15th, 2020. All right, good afternoon. We're here at Justice and Peace. Let's get right into it. First, the story out of California where 2 men are found hanging from trees almost 45 miles apart from each other. Now, this brings back a lot of visceral memories from a cultural standpoint of having people lynched in their community. And with zero to no information about what occurred, people are starting to ask for answers to the very questions as to what happened to these 2 individuals. Let's take a look at some of those questions they're asking and some of the reports that followed.
It made me cry. I really cried. I was in fear.
That fear has led to days of continuous demonstrations because the LA County Sheriff's Department initially believed Fuller's death was a suicide, even before an autopsy had been completed.
If we weren't out here, we wouldn't be getting answers. They would be saying his death was a suicide on a baby tree.
This weekend, Fuller's sisters said her family believes he was the victim of a homicide.
My brother was not suicidal.
Sheriff Alex Villanueva has promised transparency following calls from the community for an independent investigation. He also announced the state's Attorney General's office is reviewing the case, and he answered questions from the community during a virtual town hall.
We have to follow facts. That is how any criminal investigation is done. However, we also maintain a very, very big capacity to monitor the activities, hate groups, extremist groups.
In the meantime, community activists have scheduled another demonstration for Thursday when they plan to release their demands to policymakers.
We have to make sure that we are holding these sheriffs and our supervisors and all the elected officials accountable to make sure that they tell the truth. We just want the truth at the end of the day.
Now I'm joined with DeWitt Lacey, civil rights attorney out of California. Now, DeWitt, when I first heard about this, I was in utter shock, in utter fear. I mean, I think as a community, being lynched is one of those fears that I think is really chilling and goes to the bone. And then I got very agitated and angry when I heard they ruled this as a suicide before an autopsy was done. And they're going to now say we have to follow the facts. You weren't following facts when you came to that decision. You pulled that out of there. What are you making of this as you're out there on the West Coast?
Look, I think there is some trepidation that the law enforcement community and even local legislators feel about the temper or the temperate of our social atmosphere right now. And so I think they came out acknowledging this as a suicide way too quickly without seemingly there being any real investigation done or the autopsy. So I think they've done the right thing in saying, hey, we're going to look into this further. However, it does give question to the legitimacy of any efforts that the Sheriff Department will be making. And so it's good that the state attorney's office is looking into it. I hope that they do a forthright and transparent investigation because what we're talking about here is really a bubbling point of some very scary civil and social issues, and hopefully they'll respond to it better than they did initially.
Now, you're seeing the faces of these young men. I want to make sure we name them. Robert Fuller, he was found on June 12th, and here you're actually seeing a picture right now of the other victim, Malcolm Harsch, who was found on May 13th. Now, these are the two men that were found 45 miles away from each other. This is somewhat traumatic. And I've also seen town halls of them pointing out that there are video cameras in that area. I mean, in today's day and age, where both defense attorneys do it, you can always find some sort of video somewhere to give you some sort of knowledge of what happened in the area. Now my fear is because it's happened on June 12th and even in May 31st, some of that video might be deleted because some of these small shops don't keep that footage for a long time. So we might be asking for answers that we might never find. And what are we to make of that?
Certainly, we may not. There is some evidence that could have been exfoliated, if we will, and not purposely. But what we should make of it is this. Look, I don't know if there's any better way to say it. Black Lives Matter. And when there is a death of this nature, the investigation ought to be taken very and extremely seriously, especially given the cultural significance of hangings and lynchings of Black persons in this country. And whatever investigation happened beforehand doesn't appear to be as thorough as it could have been, and definitely not as thorough as it should have been.
Even now, as we're talking about this, the first thing at the front of my mind is the song "Strange Fruit," and it breaks my heart that that song has some sort of relevance in 2020. I don't think it should have, but the song keeps playing in my mind. I want to switch gears now, but we're going to continue to follow that. Let's talk about the dancing cop, or as he was dubbed in 2015, that being Anthony Johnson. He was seen on recent video, taking a bit of a cheap shot at an individual by punching him in the face. Let's start with the punch, and then let's work our way back to how we know him in the community.
Get back! Or what? Get back! Or what? Get back! Or what? Get back!
Now, just to give some context as what's going on here, Robertson, the person who you see taking a punch to the face there, he stepped in because he believed that his wife was going to be subject to some sort of violence. Now, I know the argument, he should have listened to the officer's command, he should have done what he was told, but we keep seeing that it seems that the police response to, oh, you're not going to follow my orders? Okay, violence. And we don't allow that in any other avenue or any other aspect of our world where you get this, if you don't listen, you must feel type of notion. But here you have an officer not trying to detain him or trying to move him away, but just taking a pop shot at his face. And the officers swarm as if it's like sharks getting chum in the sea. It's a weird reaction to just jump someone in that way.
I hear you. Although I might disagree with the characterization of weird, because we've seen it happen in all too many instances, and it's become quite commonplace that law enforcement meets any objection to their authority, any question to their authority, with some increased level of force that is unnecessary, and oftentimes will escalate things into some type of further violence. In this circumstance, look, the young man, it seems pretty obvious, was stepping up to take care and make sure this woman, his wife, was protected. And I think that was a perfect opportunity for law enforcement to use some of the skills that they have around de-escalating situations. And I think that officer could have done that quite easily. Instead, he chose a provoking action and what really was a sucker punch when it was unnecessary. And as you could see from the video as it plays out, that leads to an escalation of violence. Luckily, nobody was shot here or killed, but this is exactly the type of behavior that is inconsistent with law enforcement practices that leads to further violence and sometimes people being killed unnecessarily.
To do it, let me throw this at you and see if it changes your analysis, because in 2015, this officer was a good apple. And let me show you the video that went viral to that point.
What? Get it? Hey, what? Cause I'm feeling what? Throw a flag on the plane. Let somebody get the cut. Pull up. Hey, hit the car. Hey, hit the car.
I mean, maybe his dance moves have something to be desired, but I think that's at the heart of what we're talking about community policing. Know your community, understand them, interact with them in a way that creates empathy. And so when you're dealing with them in a professional capacity, you're not going to see the pop shots like we saw. But 2015, we see him dancing. 2020, we see a punch to the face. Does that change anything for you in terms of the calculus of this situation?
No, it doesn't. I think, look, officers are trained and they have a pretty uniform training around how to respond in situations like this. So it doesn't change my analysis. He was an officer. He was responding to the situation. I think he responded inappropriately. However, I think one thing that should be noted is this. The notion oftentimes is that people who perpetuate these type of violent acts on Black folks in particular are some type of menacing and vicious, mean people. Some people have labeled them gorgons or ghouls or monsters, and they're not. They're regular people that sometimes might be dancing with your kids, or sometimes might be holding the grocery store door open for you, while in the next instance exhibiting some behavior that is questionable. I don't know if it's fair to say it's racial, but I doubt he would have acted that way in a very affluent white neighborhood.
I would agree. Now, just to give some context, the officers were there because they heard reports of gunfire, but instead it was fireworks. No guns were recovered. But Robinson, the individual who was punched in the face, he was arrested. We'll continue with more of that. We'll take a quick break and come back to more here at Justice and Peace. All right, so let's switch gears just a little. Rayshard Brooks out of Atlanta. A lot of news coming out of his shooting. We've seen the video of the shooting that ended his life. 3 shots fired, 2 to the back. But let's now listen to the 911 call that brought the officers there and started this entire incident.
Hey, Atlanta 911, operator 7729. What's location emergency? 125 University.
Okay, 125 University Southwest. Is it at the Wendy's?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you need police, fire, ambulance out here.
The police.
Okay, tell me what's going on.
I have a car. I think he's intoxicated. He's in the middle of my drive-thru. I tried to wake him up, but he's parked dead in the middle of the drive-thru, so I don't know what's wrong with him.
Is he breathing now? Do you know?
Yeah, he woke up, looked at me, and I was like, you got to move out of the drive-thru because people can't. They're going around him. He's in the middle of the just right
All
there.
right. Tell me what kind of car he
So they're trying to go around him.
What's the
and
color
I asked him to pull over. You know, if he not had too much to drink, to pull over and go to sleep. He said they said he went right back after I walked in.
What kind of car is it?
It's a white car. He just sitting there. You can't miss me.
Is he black? Is he black? White, Hispanic, or Asian?
Yeah. He black.
Okay, in a white sedan in the middle of the drive-thru.
No, let me see what kind of car. It's right here. He's right here. The car's going around him.
Okay. All right. Does he appear to have any weapons, ma'am?
Ma'am?
Does he appear to have any weapons from where you can see him?
No. I think he's intoxicated.
All right. All right. Give me your name and callback number.
So I'm joined today with Adam Conta. Adam, thank you again for being here. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So let's put together video and 911 call along with your experience with DWIs, or as they call them in some states, DUI. What did you make of this interaction and how it escalated so quickly?
Well, obviously, this is a tremendous tragedy. I'm sure the woman who called was just calling out of simple concern. She wasn't scared for safety. He was just blocking a drive-through. but now you put the video with the 911 call and also the toxicology report that says he only blew a .10. You know, this is not someone who is incredibly intoxicated, and you can tell from the initial interactions he had with the police. This is someone who was just over the limit, who had fallen asleep, and had started to have a fairly run-of-the-mill interaction with police until it obviously turned so deadly and so tragic so quickly. Something that's incredibly avoidable, especially when you see the video of him being shot in the back running away.
Let's actually take a look at that video, and so we can get some more context of how this incident escalated from literally 0 to 100. Let's take a look.
I think you've had too much to drink to be driving. Put your hands behind your back for me. Here, put your hands behind your back. Hey, stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! You're gonna get tased! You're gonna get tased! Stop! Mr. Wrong! Stop! Come on, man! Stop! You're gonna get tased! Mr. Wrong! Hey, hands off the fucking taser! Hands off the taser! Stop fighting! Hands off the taser! Stop fighting! You got my fucking taser! Oh, 63.
Now that's from the body cam video, so that's the video that's attached to the officers. But as we discussed with Adam, you'll be able to see from a better vantage point from Wendy's as you can see them running. Adam, what really bothered me here is I'm thinking about the standard in which officers are allowed to use deadly force. I've seen some back and forth discussing that a taser is considered deadly force. I don't think it is in its normal capacity. But the thing that bothered me in this video is that in that run, you see the officer, you can see it now, has his taser in his hand, decides to drop the taser, and instead goes to the more deadly force. I don't see at that point in time why he's ratcheting this up to another level. What are you seeing from that video as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, the video it really speaks for itself. An officer can use deadly force if their life is in imminent danger. If deadly force is being used or the threat of deadly force is being used against them. This is just not that case. He had a taser and he was running away. He wasn't running towards them. He wasn't saying, I'm going to kill you. He wasn't doing any of those things. He made a bad decision, no doubt. And he should have been arrested for running from the cops. But he should have been arrested peacefully, and he should have had his day in court. There was no need to escalate it to the point where an officer, a 27-year-old officer, same age, pulled out his firearm and shot him in the back, robbing him of the rest of his life.
Yeah. And Adam, as I see this, I'm trying to look at the charges. I'm seeing felony charges that would maybe apply in New York, but nothing that a person would be sitting in jail for over 5 or 6 years, and so therefore nowhere close to the death sentence. But we keep hearing this argument of, well, if you had just listened to them being the officers, then he'd still be alive. Why is it that we keep equating non-compliance with justification of death?
Well, that's a fair question, and I think and that's being asked a lot by a lot of people these days. But for a second, let me take the flip side of that. Think about if Rayshard Brooks was shot in the exact same way 6 months ago. This is someone who had an altercation with the police, who ran away after stealing a taser and fired a taser at an officer. I actually think that out of this terrible tragedy, this is sort of important, because I think all the protesting and how much energy that the country is focusing right now on police brutality, on the use of excessive force. This officer was fired within 24 hours. The police chief stepped down almost immediately, and Mayor Bottoms came on TV and said unequivocally, this is not okay. We are going to rebuild and reevaluate our police force. So to get back to your question, there's just there might not be charges that meet what we think of as justice, because he was murdered. He was straight up murdered. But the fact that it's getting this level of attention and that steps are being taken to give the family the justice that is allowed within the law at this time, at the very least, are steps that I don't think we would have seen a few months ago.
Absolutely agree. I don't even think that this would have been a story that would have been covered as much, maybe outside of a network like this, because there is that gray area that people like to argue as to, well, he should have complied, he should have done this. I do think that there are steps being taken, but I guess the question is, what further steps can and should be taken? Because I don't think anyone wants to see this again.
No one wants to see this again. No one wanted to see. No one should ever have to see this, and we're not there yet. There's no doubt. As a country, we're not there. And you and I have joked many times, I think, that the defense attorneys and civil rights attorneys, defense attorneys in particular, have often gotten like the bad guys of lawyers. We represent the bad guys, but that's not the case. And the nation is starting to see that more and more. We have more and more allies that are demanding justice, equal justice for all. And this is a really good example of how the people have demanded that this is a story. Because like you said, it wouldn't have been. Maybe on this network, maybe in the local Atlanta papers, but no chance where I am in New York would we have heard about this 6 months ago. And I think the answer is quite simply, keep it up. Everyone who's out there protesting, everyone who's demanding better, we're on the way. There are certain municipalities. I just saw yesterday that San Francisco is now sending non-armed, non-police to non-criminal 911 calls. That's a huge step. That's a huge step, and good for them for leading the way. And these are all things that are changing and changing rapidly because of the voice, the collective voice of the people. And so all we can ask to do, all we can tell everyone is, great job. We love to have you on this side. We love your enthusiasm, and don't stop because it's working.
Exactly. I just want to echo that as well. I think that's the perfect way of saying don't stop. I think far too often we get this concept that it's a sprint rather than a marathon. Enforcing the law as it applies to citizens to ensure that our lives are cared for in a proper and just way is a marathon, not a sprint. So keep it up, everyone. We're going to keep it up here at Justice and Peace. We're going to have Bob Bianchi up next with Keeping the Peace. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Like Adam Conta said, keep it up.